Hey, bag ladies and bag dudes. I'm Sarah Lawson from So Sweetness. Thanks so much for joining us for book club discussion number 6. Hey, everybody. I'm joined by my friend Tamara.
Hi, everybody.
And tonight is kind of bittersweet for us. It's the final book club discussion for this year. It was a lot of fun projects. I read so many fantastic books, and I don't know. It's going to be sad next month when we don't have another new book to get through. So, yeah, what was your favorite thing about
I
the
think
book club this
I
year?
think getting so many people reading, including
Mhm.
me, I love to read and I get away from it for a while and then I get back into it and I
Mhm.
think I realize how much I miss it.
Yes, me too.
But I think finding all these wonderful books that have a sewing related
Mhm.
theme, you could really get sucked right in and
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
And I've just loved it, all the people saying how much they love the
Yeah,
books
me
and the
too.
interaction. And it was just fun doing it with you.
Thank you. I see Helen was watching from Australia. Clovis is watching. Oh, I also wanted to give two shout outs. One, happy anniversary to Nancy Drobniak, and also it's Renee Manendice's birthday. Happy birthday
Happy
to
birthday,
Renee.
Renee.
So lots of fun things going on tonight. And thank you for joining us. As always, it's so much fun coming to you live, and also if you're watching the recording later on in the week. So we have a lot of fun things to get through tonight. We're going to be talking about the book, of course, and also we have the author with us live. So I'd like to welcome Frances Dowell to the show. Thank you so much for joining us, Frances.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be so fun.
It's so exciting to talk with the author live on the show. Also, stay tuned. I'm going to be asking Frances some questions. If you have questions for Frances, also, we'll be taking a few live questions for Frances later on in the show. So get your questions ready if you have any
Hmm.
of them. All right. So, Frances, I wanted to jump right into my questions. So,
Okay.
I read on your website that your family moved around a lot because your father served in the military. So I was wondering, how did this affect your personality and also in your writing?
Well, as far as my personality, it's interesting because I think of myself as an introvert. I mean, I think I'm actually a well-documented introvert, but because we moved around so much, I was always really good at making friends because you had to. That was part of social survival. And my dad was in the Army, and of course, a lot of times we would be moving to places with other Army kids. When we moved on posts, like to Fort Leavenworth or Fort Hood, and so everybody knew how to do that. People were welcoming, but I would just go out and talk to people. So I was never shy. And I suppose with a different kind of life, I might have been shy as well, but that was not something that was afforded to me. But the other thing that I think it really affected me, um, the other way it affected me was that I was always around a lot of different kinds of people growing up. And, we lived overseas some in Germany, and we lived in the South, and we lived in the Mid-Atlantic region. And so and people are endlessly fascinating to me. And I am, although I can be very social, I am the kind of person who would rather go to the party and ask questions and get people to tell me their life stories. And I think that's, comes from, again, growing up the way that I did, but also realizing that people are fascinating. And even some people who don't look particularly fascinating, some people, I have to say, are really boring. But mostly if you ask the right questions, you find that everyone's got a really good story to tell.
I really identified with you when you said going to a party and asking other people questions because I feel like I'm the same way. I would consider myself shy. I have a hard time connecting with people, but there's always certain questions that you can ask everyone, and their answers direct you to more questions. And so, for
Uh-huh.
me at least, that's how I navigate through my
Yeah.
introversion, I
I
guess.
think people
Yeah.
sometimes like to talk about themselves too, so it gets them out of their shell and
They do. And sometimes if you just ask what was the great thing your mom made for dinner growing up, or what was, just something like when you
Yeah.
get people talking about food, then you're like in the money. Because but when you get people talking about the special foods of their childhood or anything, and people do like talking about themselves, and they do like talking about those sorts of things especially. And of course, I'm fascinated by childhood. I write children's books as well as quilting books, and so I'm always really interested in getting childhood stories, which I then will use in my fiction. In fact, I may use things tonight from tonight's conversation in my
That's
fiction. So
awesome.
just, yeah, be warned, ladies.
So my next question is, I think the magazine that you had, Dream Girl, is an amazing idea because I think there's much more to young girls than makeup and boys, which is what is often portrayed on
Yeah.
TV and movies and in magazines. Can you tell us more about Dream Girl and also a quick overview about the children's books you've written?
Okay, well, Dream Girl is a magazine that my husband and I published probably for, I don't know how many years we did it. We did it for a while, maybe seven, as many as 7 or 8, but certainly 5. And I got the idea because, yeah, I was looking at girls' magazines, and I'm a huge magazine lover. I was thinking about that tonight. It's like, I need to go out and buy some magazines because it's one of my favorite reading forms. But when you look at what's out there for girls, there's nothing wrong with caring about how you look or thinking about it's back to school time. What am I going to wear? I love that too. But I also had a lot of interest, and I was a creative kid. I was an artistic kid, and so I thought, why aren't there magazines for girls about creativity and art and writing? And so I'm very much a do-it-yourself person. So I will start one. It turns out it's very hard to start a magazine or to finance a magazine, but we had a really great time doing it. And it became harder to do, particularly as I had children, and although now my children are getting old at the time, they just became more and more consuming. And I was also writing children's fiction. I published my first book, which is called Debbie Co. in 2000. And as I kept writing and publishing, that became more and more, between the writing and raising kids, I couldn't do the magazine. But that's, again, it all encompasses my really strong interest in childhood and particularly, I mean, it sounds weird because it sounds incredibly narcissistic, particularly my own childhood, but it's not so much that as I think we all have periods, from our growing up years that stay with us. I know I'm friends with the young adult author Sarah Dessen. She lives close by, and I think for her it's like those stories from high school still preoccupy her and that's how I feel about a lot of my books. The narrators 10, 11, 12, and I just that was such a fascinating time. I mean, it was kind of horrible and wonderful and interesting, and so I keep going back to that. So and that when I did Dream Girl, it was the same audience, maybe a little bit older, but anyway, so I started publishing in 2000, and I've published a lot of books now, and primarily realistic fiction, a little bit of historical fiction, one sort of fantasy novel. I like to jump around, and also I have some early readers, just because I keep trying to write a picture book and I can't quite do it. That is an art unto itself. So I started writing a picture book, and it ended up being a chapter book. But yeah, so it's been an amazing career. I felt really fortunate because it's allowed me to work from home, which as an introvert actually is a great thing.
Yes.
I love working from home.
Yeah, me too.
I love work. I do get dressed just because when my older son Jack was still little, I actually drove him to school a few times in my pajamas, and I thought, you're going to get in a wreck, and you're going to have to stand up by the side of the road in your bathroom. I know that will happen. You're tempting fate. So I do get dressed in the morning, but yeah, that's worked really well for me. I was doing something, I guess it was yesterday. I was folding laundry, and I was the only one home, and I was just, sort of thinking thoughts. I thought, this is so great. I know so many people would just be going nuts, just being by themselves as much as I'm by myself. But I have a very active imagination, and so it's been a really good life.
I see Dana has comments and a question. The short stories are so good and leave you wanting more of each
Thank
story.
you.
Does Frances have any plans to write more and develop a novel out of any of them?
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Dana. Thank you. And I've thought about it. I feel like the story that probably has the most potential to be a novel is the Off-Kilter quilt, the last story, in part because in some ways that story ends at the beginning of the next stage. I think we see that something's going to happen with Melissa and Jim and Casey, and that I sense they are going to become a family. And so we could keep going. And I love those characters. They're funny. It's fun. It's fun to write funny people, and so I could definitely see that. And I also, with Persimmon Moon, it's a different kind of story for me because it has that magical realism element, and I could see kind of trying to explore that a little bit more and see what else is done with those fabrics from Paris. That was fun. I actually was looking at that story today. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember like looking at fabric stores, Paris, and not reading French and not actually knowing if what I was really, I think those are real stores in Paris. But I love that idea of the ant sending over fabric and those fabrics having these kind of magical
That one is
qualities.
real because it's lace, and I collect lace.
Oh, really?
I'm
Oh,
familiar.
good.
Yeah, I'm
Yay.
familiar with the one with the lace. I can't remember the name of it right now, but
Oh, cool.
I'd love to go there.
Yeah. They seem to be, obviously the internet is very helpful in that regard. But anyway, so I could see continuing with that story as well. But I know that some people don't like short stories because they feel like they get invested with those characters, and they want to keep going, and which I totally get. As a writer, I think I love the shorter format, and mostly because I'm really lazy. It's like, okay, we're done. We're going to go to the next plot.
Jennifer
I'm
had
really
a comment. I love how you addressed what we all worry about, our gifted quilts ending up being unused. Yeah, that's a really good comment.
Yeah, and it's funny. I have friends who don't make, they make quilts for charity. They make the quilts to fill up their houses, and then they quilt for charity. But a lot of people have that experience, that have experiences that have not been that positive with giving quilts, or that idea of I just hope for the best when I give quilts. I still make people quilts, and I was like, use it. I'll make you another one.
Yeah, definitely. What inspires you on your Off-Kilter Quilt podcast? And by the way, I'm linking to several things in the description, including the podcast, in case you'd like to check it out more. You can find those links in the description, everyone. So what inspires that podcast?
Well, partly I feel like it's having a conversation. And I have to say, I went through this I'm sorry, my son is texting me. Stop. No, that's terrible. My beloved son, my child. Anyway. Okay. So the Off-Kilter quilt, yes, as I said, I didn't do it for a few months this spring, and I'm not sure why. Partly, I think, because I've been doing a lot of work with the Quilt Alliance, and doing some interviews and things. And so I'm getting my quilt conversation in that way. And I really see the Off-Kilter quilt as a kind of conversation that was started by other podcasters. One of my favorite quilting podcasts is no longer being recorded, but it's called Quilting for the Rest of Us with Sandy Hasenhauer. And that was the first one I listened to. And she did a similar kind of podcast that I do, which is just chatting about her quilting. She was a little more organized, and actually sometimes had topics, which I never do. I just chat about what I'm quilting. But I felt like I was in conversation with Sandy in my head. I thought, well, I'd like to continue this conversation, and so I started the Off-Kilter quilt 9 years ago. And but that's, I think, I mean, I'm part of a guild now, the Triangle Modern Quilt Guild, and so I do have people in my life who I can discuss quilting with. But the great thing about podcasting, doing this kind of just homemade podcast, I don't interview people. I don't try to teach you anything. I have nothing to teach you. I have very little to give other than chatting about quilts. And if you make quilts, you love talking about quilts. So this is great because I get to chat, and then people comment, and it's wonderful. And I've actually made friends through the podcast, which has been lovely. But that's what I think that I know for me, the joy of listening to quilting podcasts, and particularly this kind of homemade, kind of just someone sitting with a cup of coffee talking about their quilts, is you just get to hear someone talk about what you love, and that's what I enjoy about doing the Off-Kilter quilt. And then I enjoy the kind of community it's brought me into, both with other podcasters, but really very much with people who listen to the podcast and get in touch. And as I said, Durham, North Carolina, where I live, is a lot. a lot of people going to the beach, coming from, you know, the Midwest. They go through Central North Carolina, and I've gotten to meet a lot of people. Or when I go to QuiltCon, for instance, my friend Andrew, who may be listening to this right now, yeah, I've gotten to meet up with her a couple times, and that's just been wonderful. It's been a way of creating community that's been just fabulous.
Yeah, I think community is really important, and especially whatever community you're a part of, just being able to surround yourself with the people and the things that make you
Common
happy.
interests.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely.
9 years is a long time, Francis. That's impressive.
It is. I was worried that I was pod fading this spring, but I'm back on it. But and also I don't know if you guys get this, where I quilt a lot, but the last couple months, and I'm not sure why, I haven't been as quilty, and so I haven't been, I think, podcasting as much. But I'm back, and I'm feeling my quilty mojo again. So
Okay,
we'll be
good.
posting more episodes. Yeah, because I don't want to fade.
Excellent. So the quilts described in Margaret Goes Modern were so vivid in my mind when I was reading the stories that I almost felt that they were real. So have you made projects that inspired those particular quilts in the book that you wrote about?
Not in the book, and actually that was because I'm lazy. It's actually very fun to make up quilts that you don't actually have to put all the time and effort and money into
Into a
making.
pattern.
You know, now I have a novel called Birds in the Air, and which is a contemporary, and it's a whole novel. It goes on for pages and pages, and I did make quilts for that, based on the Birds in the Air pattern. And I'm working on the sequel to Birds in the Air, and I'm actually creating quilts to match the quilts in the book. So that's been kind of, and I did that. I've done that with Friendship Album as well. I have made some of the quilts that are in the story, and it's real. I love that kind of layering of, I don't know how to describe it, but it's another element to the story for me to actually be making the quilts that I'm writing about. But I didn't do that with Margaret Goes Modern, and I'm not sure why. I'm not sure the idea had occurred to me.
Oh, by the
I'm
way,
slow.
we've also linked to Birds in the Air in the description. So if you couldn't get
great.
enough of Margaret Goes Modern, then you have Birds in
I
the
already
Air to read.
downloaded it. I
Yeah,
haven't
did you?
started it yet.
Yeah, so did I. So did I.
And I love someone's comment. They said, try one of Sarah's bags when you're in a quilting lull. I'm like, that's such a good idea.
That is
That's
a
what
good
I should
idea.
do. That's a great idea. Because sometimes just making something gets you moving again, gets the mojo going again.
Yeah, it's true. So you also have your quilt fiction website, and I started listening to the novel that you kind of touched on, Friendship Album. I'm really looking forward to finishing the rest of it, and I really love the accents that you added for some of the characters. Like I don't know, it just made it more like real and present for me. So tell us more about that quilt fiction website, and it's a podcast also. Is that correct?
Yes. And right now the podcast is very much connected. I mean, the website is very much connected to the podcast itself. And thank you for saying that about the accents. It's funny because the story is set in Ohio and everyone sounds really Southern. And I'm not actually Southern, but I'm married to a Southerner, and I can, but it's the easiest way for me to distinguish characters because I'm not an actress. I love reading out loud, but but that's the only, it's like all I can do. So I actually, as I was writing, I wrote the story. I only had about maybe 140 pages written, and I decided the way I was going to finish the novel was to podcast it because I'm very good about meeting my commitment. So if I made a commitment to the listener that I was going to finish the book, I knew I would. So as I was reading it out loud and still writing on it, I wrote in I made that, like one of the characters, Eula, I made her come from West Virginia. That was her background. So that's why she could sound a little Southern. And so anyway, so the Quilt Fiction website is very much connected to the podcast. But I love quilting stories. I love writing quilting stories. And so that's, and also I love reading quilting stories. And so it also started as a way of gathering, a way to gather lists of books and talk about these books with other people. Don't kill me. My son has no idea. Okay. I have to do this. This is terrible.
Well, while Frances is taking care of that, I just wanted to let everyone know that if you have, if you have a question for Frances, go ahead and type that in the comments right now. Danny's uh, got his eye on all the comments on Facebook and YouTube, and we're going to try to get some of your questions on the screen for Frances before she has to go. And we still have, Tamara and I will still be discussing the book, so stay tuned for that as well. So
I'm back. I think we're done. Sorry about that.
It's called reality.
So my last
It is my
question.
friend. Okay.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, his best friend is moving tomorrow, and he's got school tomorrow, so he's texting like, "Is it okay if I stay out there?" Just go, just be free anyway.
So I was wondering, my last question was, what is your favorite sewing or quilting tip or tool that you can share with us?
Oh, this feels so violent. This is it. This is, and I keep it in a wine cork, but this is my seam ripper, and it's a really good one. It's like I could do surgery with this. The patient would die, but I could I could go right in there with it, and of course, and it just had this plastic cap on it, like a sheath, and that felt
That's
like
a great idea with the cork. I have one of those.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
and
great
so
idea.
now, yeah, so
Keeps
this
it
it
safe
feels
so you
much
don't cut
safer.
yourself.
And then if I lose the cork,
You can find it.
somehow I'll find another one. So, anyway, but I also I do my own quilting, and I do machine quilting on a domestic machine, and I love doing it. I do a lot of straight line quilting. I do all kinds of quilting, all kinds of quilts, but particularly modern quilts. And I do enjoy quilting, but I do a lot of improv quilts. I do a lot of improv quilting. For some reason, I'm not good at looking at a quilt that I've made, the quilt top, and going, how should this be quilted? So a lot of times I'm testing out stuff as I'm quilting, and I'll try out an idea, and if it works, that's great. But if not, I've got this. And so I do also a lot of quilting, and I just kind of factor that into my process. And I know some people that would make them crazy, but as long as I don't overdo that, because at some point you can start damaging your fabric if you do too much on quilting. But I like having that freedom of making mistakes. I talk a lot in both quilting and writing fiction, or any kind of writing, that you have to always risk failure, and that means trying things that might not work. But if you go into it saying, yeah, this may completely fail, this idea really might not work out, I just find it so freeing. And I'm a big reviser.
I love that.
Yeah, it's so important to me. And as particularly, as a writer, I revise a lot, and which is also freeing to me. I'm working on a really horrible first draft right now of a children's novel, and it doesn't have a plot, which is a problem, particularly with children. They love plots. Most human beings do. Most readers do. And I'm just like, it's a bad first draft, and I will get this all down, and then I will revise it. I'll take my mental fiction writer go through with it, and rebuild and requilt it and rewrite it. And that I have to have that, because I am messy and undisciplined and creative and all of those things. So I have to know that I can go back in, that it doesn't have to be right the first time.
Yeah, that's
which I think is really important, particularly for writers. And I talk a lot to young writers, who a lot of times are frozen by that idea that their story has to be perfect. It's like nothing has to be perfect.
Part of the creative process, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which it fascinates me, because I love that, how you do, you've got this idea and you think it's great, and you put it on the page or on the design wall, and it falls flat, and then you just switch something around, and all of a sudden you actually revision it. Yeah, and that to me is so exciting. And like, where did that idea come from? I have no idea. I think it must be the muse or the universe. But that to me is the funnest thing about being creative, is that kind of that moment when everything is lost, and then suddenly it's like, no, just switch those blocks. And you're like, or switch those paragraphs, or cut out that chapter. I love that.
You kind of touched on Connie's question. You mentioned you were working on the children's book, but Connie wanted to know, do you have any ideas for future books?
I do. And I actually, so, we were talking a little bit about Friendship Album 1933, and that's the Quilt Fiction podcast. That's the novel that's up, and it's up in its entirety now. I think I posted the last episode maybe in April or early May. I would like to. I love these. I like these characters very much in this novel, and it's set up uh, to have room for a sequel. And in fact, there's some storylines that still need to work themselves out. So I definitely want to do the sequel to that. I'd also like to do some more short stories. Again, sometimes you have an idea that is not going to carry the weight of a novel, but it's still a good story. And 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 you can sometimes write a draft of a story in a week or two, and novels never work that way. They take so long. And so yes, but I know I would like to write a sequel to Birds in the Air, and in fact have a draft of that. This still needs some work, but then do the next book in the friendship album, and then who knows. And I will work on those things, and in the middle of that I will come up with an entirely new idea, and we'll see if I have the self-discipline to resist, or just it's like making quilts, and sometimes you're like, okay, I'm gonna step off and do this new project. Although I have to tell you, for the first time in my life, I have like 6 or 7 UFOs, and that's really weird for me. But maybe it's good. Maybe it just means I've had so many ideas. I don't, I just want to do them all. I want to do all the quilts and all the books.
Yeah, I like to call it getting distracted by shiny objects,
We call it
Yes.
squirreling too.
Yeah.
You say squirrel, and then you want to do work on something, and then
Yes.
squirrel,
Yes.
another one.
Exactly. No.
Nancy had a question. Is there anyone you're really looking forward to interviewing on Story Bee or on your podcast?
Yes, and so Story Bee is the interview web show that I do for the Quilt Alliance. The Quilt Alliance is a nonprofit organization. We collect quilt stories, essentially true ones. We have the largest collection of quilt-related oral histories in the world, and
Wow.
you can go online to Quilt Alliance, and there are interviews with very famous quilters and quilters you've never heard of before, but have amazing stories. And one of the things that we do is this web TV show, and it's a way of giving it's a reward for membership. As far as who am I looking forward to, I have to tell you that the interview I'm very looking forward to having aired is coming up in a couple months. I interviewed Jenny Dowell, and I'm going to tell you, if you want a good time, interview Jenny Dowell. And I mean, I feel like the Missouri Star Quilting Company. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
That story itself is fascinating. She's fascinating, and she has this background in theater, and it just and she's a performer, and at the same time you just feel like, oh, she loves me more than she just makes you feel like you are special, like, oh, me and Jenny don't, we're like, but she's just one of those people.
We're besties.
She makes you. Yeah, I know. It's like that. And she probably doesn't remember my name at this point because we did the interview a couple months ago. But she's one of those people who makes you feel seen and valued. And obviously the interview was not about me, but the conversation made me feel that way, like we were having a real conversation. So I'm looking forward to that one being aired. Again, if you're interested, go to Quilt Alliance. We've interviewed so many great people. It's been just it's been so much fun for me, because then I get to ask them all those the things that I really want to know. And sometimes, in magazines, there's not a lot of interviews anyway. But a lot of times, if you're looking for interviews online or in magazines, they don't go very deep. And I really love getting into people's histories and that sort of thing. So that's just so thank you for asking about Story Bee, because I'm really proud of the work that we're doing at the Quilt Alliance. And yes, and if you have any ideas for who you would like me to interview, let me know, because we're always looking for new people to talk to.
Dawn had a question. Do you have a quilting book? I'm assuming
About
she
how
meant
to
quilt
make
patterns.
quilts?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would assume too. And Dawn, you would not want me. I don't. I just, I have a really good friend, Patty, Dudek, who is, in fact, when I do the quilts for the Friendship Album book, Patty does the math. She's an engineer and a mathematician. So I could actually see at some point doing a book of the Friendship Album quilts, but I would need a lot of help, because I often Skype with Patty. I'm like, I need you to figure out the math for me. So, I would love, I mean, if I did a quilting book, it would, I think, probably have patterns and stories. I think that would be really fun to do, but I don't have one yet. Yeah.
Leanne wants to know, how long does it take you to write a book, start to published?
It really depends. So, so Friendship Album, the one that's on the podcast, that probably, that's hard to say because I'm always working on a children's book. That's really where, I have contracts. I publish with Simon and Schuster, and so that's, I'm on a schedule. I have to have drafts done. So Friendship Album really took several years, but there were big chunks of time when I wasn't working on it. But say if I were to sit down and go, okay, I'm going to write a children's book, a middle grade book. So we're talking sort of 5th, 6th, 7th grade. That will be probably in manuscript, about 170 pages. The first draft can take anywhere from 3 months to a year. And then there's the editing process. And I've worked with the same editor. Her name is Caitlin DeLuey. My entire career, we've worked together for almost 20 years now. And so, and we just go through these cycles of revisions. So probably from beginning to end on a typical children's book for me, the process is probably 18 months. So yeah, and that's from when I start, when it's in the bookstore. With a book like Friendship Album, again, it's just harder to gauge because I'm doing so many other things at the same time. I kept having to put it down. That's one reason why I did the podcast. I'm like, if I do the podcast, I will get focused on this. But what'll be I would like to actually have that published as a book. So right now it just exists in audio. And so this could be very interesting because the next step will be looking for a publisher. And my publisher of Simon and Schuster just does children. It's Athenaeum Books for young readers. So they just do children's books. So that will be an adventure.
Oh, that's my sister. Hi, Barb.
All right. So Tamara has the last question for Frances.
I was curious. I loved all the stories and all the characters. What was, out of the 5, what was your favorite story to write out of the 5 stories in this book?
I go back and forth. I loved writing Persimmon Moon. That's the first story. In part, like I was saying, it's a little bit of a different kind of story for me. It was a story that in some ways came fairly easily. And I didn't have to do a ton of revision. I revised a lot as I'm writing, so that was going on. But also, I remember when I sat down to write it because it was a fall afternoon, and I just thought, I want to write a story. I want to, and it was just lovely. And of course, it's fall in the book, and so I loved where that story went, and it surprised me. I didn't know. I never know where my stories are going, but it was really neat. It was just such a different story for me, and I loved the characters. You have to love your characters, because otherwise it's too tedious.
I loved the magical undertone to it, and yeah, I loved that they were so young instead of the typical, so much older. I thought it was just really cool that they were so much younger.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess they are the youngest one. Those characters those are the youngest. And then you've got Margaret, I think, which may be the next story. And that was interesting to write too, because she's 75. And she's actually fairly different from my own mother. It's not a biographical or autobiographical situation, except in that story, I mean, my mother's very sweet, so I want to make that clear. Where Margaret is, she's kind of tough, But that was an interesting story for me to write because I was like Jenny. I think Jenny was probably a little bit more of a problem child than I was, but I wasn't a great daughter. I'm a great daughter now. My mom's always like, "You're so nice now. It's so nice that you're so." And she's a quilter. So which is really fun. It's been so much fun to have that in common. But it was interesting to write a story from the point of view of someone who has grown children who are old enough to have colonoscopies, which my mother is old enough for that. But I really enjoyed writing the Off-Kilter quilt because I liked those characters so much, and it's they're funny, and it's although it's not a laugh out loud roll around on the floor story, it's still I think it's everyone is pleasantly goofy but I hope real. I hope
Still real,
recognizable.
yeah.
Yeah. And I could that is the story I really see that could be expanded into a novel. And when I read it, I thought, yeah, it's and with that is the thing about short stories is you create these characters, and I mean this happens with novels as well, that you would like to spend more time with. And I feel that way there's still a lot to talk about with Melissa and Jim.
Joanna says improv was a wonderful story. It made me think about making judgments.
Yes, thank you. That's a story. That was like a therapeutic story for me because I can make judgments, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had this situation in which, I'm very imperfect, and I actually feel like it's a kindness to share one's imperfections, and you don't want to overshare, but to let people know that your life is not perfect, and your children, it's like your children, the picture on the Christmas card is not really your life. And I've had some people in my life, some fellow moms who have made me feel less than. And it's been hard for me, but important to kind of try to step back and go, what's going on in their lives that everything has to be so perfect all the time? And I don't wish difficulty. I don't want to find out that, well, no, their lives aren't perfect, and in fact everything is terrible. But early on in that story, like Liz is kind of saying, your husband is having an affair. That's what she wants to write.
It made me laugh out loud when you
Yeah, and that impulse is pretty close to the bone in some ways. And so, but it was kind of, so as I said, it was kind of a therapeutic story for me to write, because I have my own judgments. I can, and you do, and in that situation, I think I've grown enough as a human being to go, yeah, you're kind of judgmental too. You're making judgments about these mothers, and not always kind. And so I liked writing that and trying to explore what was it like to be Sherry, what was going on in Sherry's life. And it was also fun having Sherry fall apart at the end, because it turns out that her perfectionism was a kind of coping mechanism. And she didn't like chaos, and she didn't want it, and that was legitimate. That that order is important to her, and just as a way of getting by, which I like order too. But anyway, so it was good for me to kind of explore both of those characters.
Well, I personally loved all of the short stories, even though each of the characters might have been different than me. I somehow felt like I connected to all of them in some way. So that for me, that was the special part of the.
We were talking about that before we met, did the show, and I think we both at the same time said at one point in our life we could relate to one of the characters in every one of the stories. So that was really cool that you could capture that.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing your gift. Thank you for sharing your time and coming on the show. I think I speak with just about everyone that was watching. The short stories were amazing. We look forward to reading Birds in the Air. The Friendship Album podcast. Again, everything is linked to in the description. And we're looking forward to seeing what else you come up with next in the future. So thank you so much, Frances.
Well, thank you. This has been so much fun to talk to you.
All right. Thank you. Hope you have a good night.
You too.
All right. So everyone stick around. We're going to be talking about the book using the discussion questions. So let's jump right in. And then we also have at the end of the show the free project and the free video. So I'll be posting that shortly as soon as the show ends. So Tamara, so in both the first story about Amanda and Lucy in the house and the last story about Melissa meeting a man, the quilt in the story almost appears to be magical. So have you ever made a sewn item or a quilt for someone that was so special or made a big difference in their life? Or inversely, have you ever been given such a gift?
Like I said when Frances was on, I love the magical undertones. It's kind of my genre with what I love to read. The thing I thought of immediately, most of the things I make, I give as gifts. And recently, my niece, who is getting married in October, she asked me to make her a wedding garter, and I was just thrilled that she asked me to make something for her. And she was only 5 when she lost her mom and her 5 siblings. It's been about 21 years. So we've kind of watched these 6 kids kind of, be raised without their mom. So I asked her older sister to give me some lace from their mom's wedding dress, and I incorporated that into the garter and a little drawstring bag for her shoes, and then I made a robe for her and put a little piece of the lace over where her heart was, so when she was getting ready, her mom would be close to her. And she opened it at her shower a week ago last Saturday, and my gift was opened first. And when I was explaining everything to her, she started crying. I started crying. Everybody was crying, but it was happy tears. And she just loved it, and she said she'll keep it forever. I made her one to throw at the reception, and then the one to keep with her mom's lace.
Oh, nice.
So
Wow.
it was a really fun. It's why I love to sew things like that.
Mm-hmm. Wow, what an amazing keepsake. I actually have a few photos to share. Danny's going to put them up on the screen. But my favorite item that I've made for someone else.
I love that quilt.
In 2013, I made a quilt for my friend Kim. The quilt pattern is by Carolina Patchworks, and it's called Sweet Garden. But it was a secret birthday gift, and so I asked her husband to get me scans of his hand, like the outline drawing of his hand and all of the kids. And I admit my free motion skills, especially, I mean, they have not improved since 2013, so let's just be honest there, but I free motioned their handprints on the quilt, and also in cursive their names, and so that was how I quilted the quilt. And that was a birthday gift for Kim in 2013. So those were the photos. That's probably,
and I bet she sobbed. She loved it.
Yeah, so Tamara's right, it is fun using your gift or your skill to make gifts for other people. All right, so the next question that I had was, in the short story Margaret Goes Modern, Margaret joins the Modern Quilt Guild and feels a little nervous at first. She also notices that the president of the guild is a young woman, but everyone makes her feel welcome at the meeting. Do you have any experience with a similar situation in regards to comfort level? So I wrote, my 2 hobbies, sewing and my more recent hobby of horseback riding, I feel like I've met people and I've become friends with people, all different ages, all different backgrounds, just different people. And it's so fun having friends that are, like I said, different ages, different backgrounds. At the stable, I met recently Mary. Mary leases a horse just like I do, a different horse. Mary said she was 67, and every time I see Mary, she is really nice. She just starts a conversation with me, makes me feel welcome to be there. There's other girls at the stable too. Of course, you, my friend Vanessa, Sarah, who I hope is watching, and some other I have a lot of pattern designer friends, and it's just nice to have an area where I can be myself.
And
so
you can feel safe.
Yeah, and I can feel safe. So I feel comfortable. I have things I can talk about, especially being an introvert. It's hard for me to just make small talk, but if I have friends in the same hobby of sewing, I always have something to say. I don't feel like I don't belong, and that's really, for me, is rare to find friends that I feel comfortable and that I feel like I belong. So it's, I feel like the live shows and our community has also added to that sense of belonging. So I'm just very grateful for that. Yeah.
I had an opposite experience. I just started to learn how to quilt about 3-4 years ago, and I have yet to make a complete quilt from beginning to end, but I will. I'll get to it. And I went to a local quilt guild meeting a couple of years ago that someone had Recommended, and it was all women that were older than me, which is fine. I like all the different ages. Mm-hmm. Age is just a number. But they were so stuffy and rigid, and they did not want anybody asking questions, anybody that was new, and they just were shuddering at the idea of modern type quilting. And I'm probably more traditional, but I like to have an open mind to bright colors and modern quilts. And I didn't go back, and I just thought it made me sad to think eventually when all these women are gone, this is probably just going to disintegrate because they would not accept anybody new. And it doesn't mean I don't want to try out another quilt guild. I think I will eventually when I have more time. But, the exact opposite experience what you had. But I'm with you. It's a wonderful thing to have something in common. And fortunately, I have friends all over the world from all my sewing projects and retreats. And people like you, pattern designers. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, it definitely is. In the short story, Margaret Goes Modern, quilting is something that ultimately helps Margaret connect with her daughter, Ginny, whom she'd had years of not being able to share common interests or thoughts. What do you think about the power of family in this story? What did you think, Tamara?
I could really relate to this storyline, and with Margaret. I'm really close with my mom. She's 81. She has a lot of significant health issues, and part of the problem is with her short-term memory is, kind of going. And the line where Margaret tells her daughter, she admits, I'm scared that I'm going to wake up one day and her husband is not going to know who she is. And that's a really scary thought. But I loved how Jenny kind of picked up on that and wanted to work with her on teaching her how to quilt, because I kind of got the impression that they never really understood each other while she was growing up. And it kind of came full circle. Yeah. And I think it's going to help her to help with her husband. So it was really, I liked it.
Yeah, I wrote down a quote from the book. No, I mean, how hard would it be for me to make it? Ginny's voice is gentle, and suddenly Margaret realizes her daughter was trying to give her gifts for a long time now, only Margaret hadn't known how to receive them. So I just thought that was, again, they can connect now with the quilting, whereas Margaret mentioned previously in the book, she didn't understand Ginny's taste in music and her interest, and she wished she would have put forth an effort, but now they have this time together still, and I just thought it was wonderful. Yeah,
the past is the past. You can't change it.
That's true.
So move forward.
Can only move forward. Yep. In the story about Liz and the other moms, I thought it was really interesting that Liz seems to be at odds with Sherry, when in the end, the disagreement with Sherry's sister Sheila brought them closer together. Sheila said, I don't make quilts according to other people's tastes. And Liz replied, what could it hurt to make a quilt you know someone will like, even if it's not your style? So how did you feel about that? So I felt like, especially people that are close to you, either family or friends, I think it's important to listen. Listening is always important. Listen to what they say about things they like, and just kind of keep that information in the back of your head. And then when it's time for gift giving, then you have either for a handmade gift or a store-bought gift, then you have those ideas that you can incorporate their likes or their interests into their gift, instead of just making something that pleases you only. So
yeah, I thought she was a little selfish and a little arrogant.
Yeah, I felt that also.
I think for me, the best part of creating and sewing, and I just love the gift-giving part of it, is finding the perfect pattern and then sifting through and finding the perfect fabric for that particular person, whether it's a little pouch or something, more elaborate. So I can't imagine, I've never done a quilt from start to finish, and I know it takes a lot of time. I can't imagine going to all that trouble and picking everything out yourself. Well, that's what I like, and then giving that to the person, and and with her sister, how I would never imagine giving them to the Goodwill. I don't think I would ever do that. But she knew her sister, and she still did what she wanted. She knew her home, she knew her children, she knew how Sherry was, but yet she still, and then she was shocked when she didn't keep the quilts and they gave them away, and it was this rift between the two of them. So we all know how much work all this is, and how unless you sew or quilt, make bags, people don't know how much time and money and effort and the heart and soul that you put into it that it makes.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, I hope no one has any horror stories about quilts or other things that they've made being sent over to the Goodwill. But in the short story about Melissa, she meets a young girl named Casey at the library. Casey's mother had admitted that she had a hard time holding down a job or taking care of a child. How did you feel about the relationship between Melissa and Casey in the book? So what did you think about that?
It was sad, but it seemed like they both really enjoyed spending time together and getting into that routine where Casey would help her with the gardening, something she wasn't good at, and then Melissa giving her breakfast, and then they would go to the library. And Melissa obviously loved children because that was her job, with it being the children's librarian. But I also got the sense that she was very cautious and very aware that she wasn't going to take over being Casey's mom.
Yeah,
I think she easily could have
Yeah.
with the situation being what it was, but she kind of backed off. She has a mother. I'm not
Right.
her mother.
I
But-
sense that as well from Melissa. She did not want to overstep and be seen as the mother figure, but I think, especially in the world today, like, we could always use more mentors, or what they, call big brothers or big sisters.
And she was young. She was, what, 34?
Yeah, she was younger. So I think it was great that the relationship that they had, and Casey had somewhere
Safe to
safe.
go.
Yeah, a safe place. Yep. From the books, quilts are clearly important, not just to the makers. Do you take care to label or document when you make something, whether it is a bag or a quilt? And do you think about where that sewn item will be in the future? So I admit I am not good about labeling either quilts or bags. I think especially you could label a bag just like you label a quilt with a label on the inside. And these days it's so easy. You can either purchase pre-made labels from your local quilt shop, get things printed on spoon flour. They have designs for quilt labels already that you can just choose and pay for and check out.
Printer. Yep.
And I think, having my name as the maker, the date, who it was made for, and any other information, I think 100 years from now, if someone were to find any of those items, then they would at least have some information to go with.
History.
Right, the history of the item. I think that's important.
Yeah. I put labels on pretty much everything I do. Like I said, I haven't made a quilt yet, but I already have some quilt labels at home. I've made some baby blankets, and I put my label on, and pouches, bags, clothing items, that kind of thing. And for me, it's kind of the last thing that I do. So it's exciting for me to do my label, because then I know I'm done and the gift is
I
ready
could see
to go. As far as, the future, I just hope that the people enjoy using what I made, and that they use it. And you probably can't see these, but these are some of the labels that I have. I don't know where I got this one. This is just Dutch Label Company.
Okay, so the website is Dutch Label Company, if you're interested in that.
They come really fast, and you get to see what it looks like when you're designing it. And then I think these are really fun. It's kind of a folded label, and I love hearts. So it has kind of a heart, so when you fold it up, it's kind of hard to see. It says handmade on one side and the hearts on the other. I think I got a box of these, or a bag of these, in one of my quilt fat quarter shop kind of boxes.
Okay.
So I think these are kind of fun too.
Yeah, so lots of options. I feel like not as many excuses, since there's so many options out there for putting labels in your items. So what was your favorite short story from the book?
I liked all of them, but I think my favorite was probably Margaret Goes Modern.
That was mine
because I could
also.
kind of relate to it the most.
Yes.
I loved the quirkiness and the magical undertone of the first one, and then the one with her sleeping under the quilts with having the dreams. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was.
But I think Margaret Goes Modern, I think I could
the
relate
story.
to the most.
Yeah,
So
me
that's
too.
probably my favorite.
Yeah, everyone let me know in the comments what your favorite story was, and if you didn't remember the titles.
Who did you want to learn more? Which story, the characters, did you want to learn more about?
Oh, that's a good question. So my favorite was also Margaret Goes Modern, because I could see myself I just identified with so many things. Like, she talked about certain quilting products like the Supreme Slider, and I was like, yeah, I know what that is.
Angela
And
Walters.
she mentioned Angela Walters. I was like, I know who Angela is. I've met Angela, and just so many things that I totally got it. But the story I would probably like to see fleshed out the most was what Frances mentioned, the last one with Melissa and Casey, and finding out what happens if they become a family. And what all happens with that, because I feel like there's so many potentials for drama in that particular setup over there. So yeah, that's what I thought. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this last book club discussion. It's a little bit sad that it's the last one, but I feel like there was I tried to choose a great variety of different books on different topics, of course, all sewing related. So our free project for this month is, I'm calling it the Persimmon Dumpling Pouch.
You guys are going to love this one.
Another quick project. I just thought quick ones were a good option. So it comes in 3 different sizes, small, medium, and large. I show you in the video how to add the patchwork. So if you're not a quilter, it's really easy to do that. Good opportunity to use some fabric scraps, or if you like rainbows like I do, to have a little bit of a rainbow on your project. And as soon as we we stop being live, I'll get that set up and on the website for you. But again, it's a free pattern and video, and thank you for joining us on this journey. It's been a lot of fun. I've had fun with Tamara joining us every month.
It's been a blast.
Coming to our house. She doesn't mind the mess in the house, so that's
I don't
good.
even notice it.
Yeah. And thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great week. Happy sewing, and enjoy the project for the persimmon dumpling pouch.
And I have something to give you.
You do?
Yeah, this is my my very first Cricut Maker and only Cricut Maker project.
Really? Oh, you made something?
I made Sarah a bookmark out of her rose gold cork, and it says just one more page. And you probably read most of your books on like a tablet, but just in case.
I know what you mean. You're like, oh, I'm getting tired, but like, oh, just one more page is getting so good.
So in case you have a real book.
Oh,
you
thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're so sweet. All right, bye everybody. Happy sewing.
Have a good night.